This is the continuation of the summary of Eldest, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Bill. Chapter 36, Hanging by a Thread. The title of this chapter captures its essence perfectly. Hanging by a thread immerses Eragon in the raw fragility of life and the unnerving sense that even the strongest bonds can be tested by forces beyond control. It is a chapter filled with tension, where the precariousness of survival is felt in every heartbeat, and where Eragon begins to grasp just how close ruin can be at any moment. Events unfold with an immediacy that leaves little room for preparation. A sudden danger rises, whether in the form of hostile forces, nature's fury, or the unexpected unraveling of plans, and Eragon finds himself pressed to the edge of disaster. The imagery of hanging by a thread is not just metaphorical. It is palpable. Every decision a gamble that could send him plunging into failure or carry him to safety by the narrowest margin. For the first time since his arrival among the elves, Eragon feels not only tested, but nearly undone. The tension gnaws at him. His body, still bearing the scars of his previous wounds, struggles under the strain. His mind wavers between focus and panic, torn between the discipline Aromas has tried to instill and the raw fear of collapse. Saphira's voice, powerful and grounding, becomes the thread that holds him steady. She is unyielding, her presence a lifeline when all else threatens to give way. Through her, he clings to clarity, reminding himself that their bond is his greatest source of resilience. What makes the chapter so striking is its reminder of vulnerability. For all the grandeur of being a rider, Eragon is still mortal, still a boy learning to carry the immense responsibilities thrust upon him. The world does not pause for him to grow into his role. It demands everything from him now, even as he stumbles. Hanging by a thread, he feels the truth that survival is often less about power and more about endurance, about holding on long enough for the storm to pass. By the end, the danger does not vanish. It recedes, leaving behind a shaken but still standing rider. Eragon emerges from the ordeal exhausted, yet sharpened by the experience. The thread held, but barely, and the brush with collapse etches a new humility into him. He understands now that destiny offers no guarantees, that every victory is fragile, and that to endure he must cling fiercely to the bonds and strength that keep him from falling. Chapter 37, Elva. Among the many strange turns of Eragon's journey, none unsettles him more deeply than the child named Elva. In this chapter, innocence and power collide, revealing the heavy weight of unintended consequences. Elva is both a marvel and a haunting, a reminder that even the noblest intentions can carve scars in unexpected places. The story begins with Eragon learning of the gift he once bestowed on the infant Elva, a blessing spoken in the ancient language meant to grant her protection and good fortune. But words in the ancient tongue carry binding power, and his inexperience with its subtleties twisted the blessing into something else entirely. Rather than shielded from harm, Elva has been cursed, or blessed, in a darker sense. She now feels the pain of those around her, compelled to draw suffering into herself to spare others. When Eragon finally sees the child, the sight chills him. Elva, though still young, carries an uncanny presence. Her eyes are too knowing, her manner too solemn for her years. She speaks with a gravity that no child should possess, describing the torment of her strange gift with clarity that borders on eerie. Those who look at her see not only a girl, but something otherworldly, touched by magic beyond control. To Eragon, guilt floods him. his careless use of the ancient language has condemned her to a life of agony. Yet Elva does not weep or shrink from her condition. Instead, she embraces it, twisted though it may be, wielding her ability like a weapon. She can anticipate danger, sense weakness, and manipulate the suffering of others with unnerving precision. What should have been a blessing of protection has created something far more complex. A child who moves like a shadow of fate, equal parts savior and specter. Saphira responds to Elva with wariness, sensing both her power and the wrongness of her condition. Through their bond, she sharpens Eragon's awareness of his mistake, not to torment him, but to teach him the gravity of a rider's words. Magic is not a toy, and intention does not excuse consequence. Elva's existence is proof that even compassion, when mishandled, can bring harm. By the end of the chapter, Eragon feels the crushing weight of responsibility. He knows he cannot undo what has been done, at least not yet, and the guilt gnaws at him. Elva, in her unsettling presence, becomes a living reminder of the cost of inexperience and the fine line between blessing and curse. The chapter closes with unease, leaving Eragon haunted by the child who should have been shielded by his gift, but instead became something far stranger and perhaps more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. Chapter 38. Resurgence. After the chilling encounter with Elva, Resurgence carries the story forward with the pulse of renewal. It is a chapter about rising again after fear, about rediscovering strength in the face of despair, and about realizing that healing often comes not as a sudden gift, but as a hard-fought return to balance. Eragon's body, broken and weakened since the battle with Durza, has long been a source of shame and frustration. Every spasm, every tremor reminded him of his frailty, of the shadow of defeat lurking within him. Yet here, in the presence of the elves, and under the weight of their rituals and magic, something shifts. A renewal stirs in his veins, gradual but undeniable, as if the very land of Du Veldenvarden is answering his struggle with its own ancient vitality. The elves, whose lives are tied so closely to the natural world, become instruments of this resurgence. Through their spells and ceremonies, they seek not only to mend flesh, but to restore balance between body, mind, and spirit. Eragon learns that healing is not merely the erasure of scars, it is the weaving of broken threads into new strength. What was once a weakness becomes a source of resilience, and his sense of self begins to align once more with the destiny he has been called to bear. Saphira plays an integral role in this renewal. Her bond with Eragon deepens as she pours her own vitality into him, lending not just strength but purpose. She reminds him that he is not alone in his suffering, that every pain he endures is shared, and every triumph belongs to them both. Her presence steadies him, her fire warming the places within him that fear had left cold. With her, resurgence becomes not just recovery, but rebirth. By the end of the chapter, Eragon feels the first true stirring of hope in his body and spirit since his wounding. Though not fully restored, he is no longer defined by frailty. The resurgence is both physical and symbolic. The boy who faltered under pain begins to rise into the rider he was meant to be. The path ahead remains steep, but for the first time in many chapters, he feels strong enough to walk it with pride. Chapter 40. Black Morning Glory. The beauty of the elven forest often dazzles with its harmony and light. Yet in Black Morning Glory, Eragon discovers that even within wonder, there lurks danger. The title evokes both the elegance of the flower and the dark undertones hidden in its petals, and the chapter unfolds as a meditation on how nature mirrors the duality of existence. life intertwined with peril, beauty bound to shadow. As Eragon walks deeper into Du Veldenvarden, he encounters the plant for which the chapter is named. At first glance, it is breathtaking, velvety blossoms opening to reveal a rich, almost hypnotic hue, their fragrance sweet and alluring. Yet beneath its surface lies poison, subtle and lethal. The elves teach him that this flower, admired for its beauty, carries death in its roots and petals, a paradox that reflects the world itself. Nothing is purely benign, not even in their seemingly perfect realm. The lesson unsettles Eragon, for it strikes close to his own fears. Just as the flower holds danger within beauty, so too does he carry within himself both promise and peril. His power as a rider is immense, but so are the risks of misuse. The black morning glory becomes a symbol of his own potential to wound as well as heal, to build as well as destroy. The realization sobers him, reminding him that power is never innocent. It must always be tempered with restraint and wisdom. Saphira views the flower differently. To her, it is not a paradox, but a simple truth. The world is fierce, and even beauty must defend itself. She respects the flower's dual nature, seeing in it a kinship with dragons, creatures admired for their majesty, yet feared for their destructive fire. Through their bond, Eragon senses her acceptance of this truth, and it steadies him. If beauty and danger can coexist in harmony within a single bloom, then perhaps he, too, can reconcile the contradictions within himself. By the close of the chapter, the image of the black morning glory lingers in Eragon's mind. It is more than a plant, it is a lesson etched in living form. Power and peril, beauty and danger, none can be separated, only balanced. As he continues his training, he carries with him the quiet reminder that what makes something awe-inspiring may also make it fearsome, and that true wisdom lies not in denying the duality, but in learning to live within it. Chapter 41. The Nature of Evil. Some lessons cannot be taught through swordplay or spellcraft. They must be grappled with in the mind. In The Nature of Evil, Eragon is drawn into one of the most difficult and unsettling discussions of his training. Here, he is asked to consider what evil truly is, not as an abstract label for enemies, but as a force woven into choice, power, and intent. The elves, with their long memories, press him to think beyond the simple answers he once clung to. Evil, they suggest, is not always cloaked in malice. It can be the result of apathy, of failing to act when action is needed, of choosing the easy path at the expense of others. It is not a monstrous face alone. It can also be the quiet neglect that allows tyranny to flourish. The realization shakes Eragon, for it blurs the line he had drawn between himself and those he fights. He reflects on Galbatorix, the tyrant whose shadow lies across the land. It is easy to name him evil, to point to the countless deaths, the shattered oaths, the cruelty of his reign. Yet Eragon is forced to ask whether Galbatorix sees himself that way, or whether he believes his own twisted justifications. The thought unsettles him. If evil can clothe itself in the guise of righteousness, then how can one ever be certain of the path they walk? Saphira cuts through his turmoil with the clarity of her dragon mind. To her, evil is not a riddle, but an instinct. It is that which destroys balance, that which wounds without reason, that which suffocates freedom. She does not wrestle with definitions as humans do. She simply knows. Her certainty offers Eragon a lifeline, though he cannot entirely dismiss the elves' challenge to think more deeply. If he is to be a true rider, he must not only fight against evil, but also guard against becoming its instrument, even unintentionally. The discussion leaves Eragon unsettled, but sharpened. He sees that evil is not something distant or alien. It is a possibility that exists in every choice, every use of power. To wield magic, to command loyalty, to shape the fates of others. These are privileges that can slide into tyranny if not checked by humility and compassion. The nature of evil, then, is not only what lies outside him, but what he must guard against within himself. By the end of the chapter, Eragon carries this truth with a sober heart. The war ahead will not be won simply by striking down Galbatorix. It will also be fought in the integrity of his own actions, in the restraint of his hand, and in the vigilance of his spirit. Evil is not a distant enemy. It is a shadow that follows every wielder of power, waiting for carelessness to give it form. Chapter 42. Image of Perfection. In Image of Perfection, Eragon is confronted with one of the most beguiling temptations of all, the vision of what it means to be flawless. The elves, with their ageless beauty, their harmony with the forest, and their seemingly effortless mastery of magic, embody an ideal that dazzles him even as it unsettles him. The chapter is less about battles or politics and more about self-perception, what it means to measure oneself against an impossible standard. Among the elves, Eragon feels both admiration and unease. Their grace is undeniable, their lives ordered and serene in ways that humans rarely achieve. To them, every gesture is deliberate, every creation infused with artistry, every word weighed with centuries of wisdom. For a boy who once tilled fields in Carvajal, it is overwhelming. He sees in them a mirror of all he wishes to be, strong, disciplined, unflawed, and yet that mirror reflects back his inadequacies. His scars, his mistakes, his awkwardness among them all stand in sharp relief against their perfection. The temptation to compare himself presses heavily. He wonders whether he will ever measure up, whether he will always be the outsider, fumbling in the presence of those born to greatness. Yet the elves themselves remind him, sometimes subtly, that their perfection is an image, not an absolute truth. Even though they are not without flaws, their discipline and long lives allow them to mask them. What Eragon perceives as effortless is the result of generations of struggle and practice, something no mortal can replicate overnight. Saphira offers her own counterpoint. To her, perfection is meaningless. It is life itself, in all its fire and chaos, that carries value. She reminds Eragon that scars do not diminish him. They are proof of endurance. Where he sees a blemish, she sees strength. Her fierce loyalty steadies him against the tide of self-doubt, reminding him that true worth is not found in mimicry of others, but in the authenticity of one's own path. By the end of the chapter, Eragon begins to understand that perfection is a dangerous illusion. To chase it blindly risks losing oneself. To hold it as the only measure of value breeds despair. The elves may embody an image of perfection, but he must learn to draw inspiration from their example without letting it consume him. His journey is not about becoming flawless, but about becoming whole, accepting weakness alongside strength, doubt alongside courage. The image may gleam, but the truth lies in the cracks that make one human. Chapter 43. The Obliterator. Some names carry weight long before the bearer appears, and the Obliterator is one such name, dark, absolute, and filled with menace. This chapter plunges Eragon into a confrontation not only with a fearsome figure, but with the idea of destruction itself, embodied in a being whose very title speaks of annihilation. The Obliterator is introduced not as a faceless soldier of the Empire, but as something more imposing, a symbol of cruelty sharpened into purpose. His reputation precedes him. whispered in dread among both enemies and reluctant allies. Where others conquer, he destroys. Where others threaten, he eradicates. For Eragon, already grappling with questions of evil and perfection, meeting such a figure is a test of his moral and physical courage. When the encounter comes, it is steeped in tension. The Obliterator does not need to roar or boast. His presence alone fills the air with dread, as though the weight of lives already crushed clings to him like a shadow. Eragon feels the chill of recognition. This is not an ordinary foe, but a man who has surrendered to the darker impulses of power, who has chosen obliteration over preservation, fear over respect. He is the antithesis of what a rider should be, a living warning of what Eragon himself could become, if his choices falter. The clash that follows is as much internal as external. Eragon's body, still not fully healed, strains against the demands of battle, yet his will refuses to bend. He sees in the Obliterator a reflection of his own fears, the potential to misuse strength, to let anger and despair carve him into something monstrous. But where the Obliterator wields power as a hammer meant only to break, Eragon fights with the determination to protect, to preserve. The struggle is fierce, yet its meaning lies less in who strikes the hardest, and more in what each fighter represents. Saphira's rage ignites at the sight of the foe. To her, he is an abomination, not because of his strength, but because of his purpose. She lends Eragon her fire, her clarity, reminding him that obliteration is not victory, that to destroy without reason is to betray life itself. With her at his side, Eragon finds the focus to resist the pull of despair and to answer destruction with defiance. By the chapter's end, the Obliterator is not erased from the story. Such a figure leaves scars even in defeat, but Eragon emerges with a sharpened awareness. Power, untempered, becomes ruin. To be rider is to walk the narrow edge where strength must always serve life, never consume it. The Obliterator stands as a grim lesson, a shadow that will haunt Eragon as he continues forward, reminding him that the true danger is not always the enemy before him, but the enemy he could become within. Chapter 44. Narda. The tale shifts from forests steeped in mystery to the harsh realities of the coast in Narda. Here, the war is not fought with swords clashing or spells blazing, but with suspicion, secrecy, and the constant danger of betrayal. For Roran and the villagers of Carvajal, the seaport town of Narda represents both opportunity and peril, a crossroads where survival demands cunning as much as courage. Narda is no jewel of the empire. It is a working town, salt-stained and wind-battered, filled with sailors hardened by the sea and merchants quick to sniff out profit. To outsiders like Roran and his people, every glance is a threat, every whisper a risk of exposure. The empire's reach is long, and the villagers know that one careless word could bring soldiers down upon them before they can even draw breath. In this environment, Roran learns that leadership is not only about rousing courage, but about guiding restraint, teaching desperate people to mask their fear behind silence. The sea itself looms large in the chapter. To those who have never left the shadow of the spine, its vastness is almost overwhelming. It offers escape, the promise of distant shores beyond Galbatorix's immediate grasp, but it also carries danger. Storms, treachery, and the cold indifference of the waves. For the villagers, setting foot in Narda is the first real step into a wider, more perilous world, and the realization weighs on them. Their flight from Carvajal has transformed them from farmers into fugitives, and now into wanderers poised on the edge of exile. Roran shoulders the burden heavily. He knows that their survival hinges on securing passage, yet every negotiation is fraught. Sailors are not swayed by sentiment, only coin and opportunity, and the villagers possess little of either. His determination, however, begins to inspire even here, in a place where trust is scarce. His words, his resolve, and his refusal to bow to despair turn him into something more than a fugitive leader. He becomes the steel that holds the group together, their hope against the press of uncertainty. By the close of the chapter, Narda feels less like a waypoint and more like a crucible. The villagers are tested by fear, temptation, and the lure of resignation, yet they emerge more tightly bound to one another. The sea calls to them, both promise and threat, and Roran understands that their journey will demand not only survival, but sacrifice. Narda becomes a reminder that rebellion is not only fought in forests and cities, but also in the choices of ordinary people who dare to keep moving, even when the horizon offers no guarantee of safety. Chapter 45. The Hammer Falls. If Roran's hammer once symbolized the strength of a blacksmith shaping iron, in this chapter it becomes the weapon of a man shaping destiny. The hammer falls is the moment when hesitation burns away, when Roran transforms from a reluctant leader into a figure of defiance whose blows echo louder than the clash of armies. The chapter opens with tension coiled tight. Empire soldiers press close, their presence a suffocating reminder that the villagers' flight is far from secret. Fear flickers among the people, but Roran stands firm, his hammer gripped not as a tool, but as an extension of his will. When the moment of confrontation arrives, he does not shrink from it. Instead, he unleashes his strength with a fury born of love, loyalty, and a burning refusal to bow. Each swing of the hammer is described with brutal clarity. It is not the elegant flourish of a swordsman, nor the precise strike of a trained soldier. It is raw, unyielding force, honed by years at the forge and fueled by desperation. Roran fights not for glory, but for survival, and in doing so, he reveals a different kind of heroism, one not reliant on dragon fire or ancient magic, but on human will pushed to its furthest edge. The villagers, watching him, find their courage rekindled. His defiance becomes their own. His hammer blows the rhythm of their resistance. The Empire may have soldiers and sorcery, but in Roran they face a man who refuses to break, whose sheer determination unsettles them more than any rider's spell. His leadership crystallizes here, not in speeches or strategy, but in the example of his unyielding stand. Yet the chapter does not glorify violence without cost. Each blow lands heavy, but so too does the realization that every strike deepens the enmity between them and the Empire. The hammer falls not only on enemies, but on the fragile hope of peace, shattering any illusion that their struggle can end quietly. Roran understands this, even as he fights. The path they are on now is irreversible. Blood has been spilled, and more will follow. By the end of the chapter, the image of Roran with his hammer stands as a defining moment. He is no longer merely Eragon's cousin or a fugitive fleeing persecution. He has become a leader forged in battle, a man whose defiance will echo across the land. The hammer falls is more than the clash of iron against bone. It is the declaration of a people's will to resist, hammered into history with every strike. Chapter 46. The Beginning of Wisdom. After the fury of the hammer and the blood-stained defiance of Carvajal's fugitives, the narrative turns once more to Eragon in the beginning of wisdom. Here the tone softens from violence to reflection, reminding us that true strength is not measured only in force, but in understanding. This chapter becomes a hinge point in his training, when lessons shift from the surface of combat into the depths of thought. Oromis, the hidden rider, leads Eragon into this awakening with patience. Unlike other mentors who pushed him with urgency, Oromis's guidance is deliberate, even gentle. He teaches that wisdom is not a destination reached in a single stride, but a path walked over time. The elves' centuries have taught them that knowledge without judgment is dangerous, that action without reflection breeds destruction. Eragon, restless and eager, struggles at first against the pace, but as the days pass, he begins to sense the truth. He must slow down in order to grow. The lessons unfold not only in words but in practice. Eragon studies languages, histories, and the subtleties of magic beyond simple spells. He learns to question, to probe deeper, to understand that every choice carries weight beyond its immediate outcome. The teachings are often humbling, for they reveal the limits of his understanding, but they also open before him a vast landscape of possibility. Each correction from Oromis becomes less a rebuke and more an invitation to see farther. Saphira, though less patient than her rider, absorbs the teachings in her own way. Her wisdom is instinctive, rooted in the raw truths of her kind, yet she too recognizes the value of reflection. Through her, Eragon balances the elves' restraint with the dragon's certainty, creating a harmony between thought and instinct. It is this balance that will one day define him not just as a warrior, but as a leader. By the close of the chapter, Eragon feels a subtle but profound shift within himself. He has not gained new powers or triumphed in great battles, but he has glimpsed a larger vision of what it means to be a rider. Wisdom is not about knowing everything, but about understanding the limits of one's knowledge and seeking always to learn more. The beginning of wisdom is not a conclusion, but a foundation, a reminder that the most important battles often begin in the mind before they are ever fought with steel or flame. Chapter 47. Broken Egg and Scattered Nest. War is not only fought in battles, it reaches into the quiet places of life and leaves its scars on family, community, and home. Broken Egg and Scattered Nest is a chapter that strips away the grand scale of riders and kings to reveal the devastation left in the wake of conflict. The title itself is stark, an image of fragility destroyed, of safety torn apart, of something that cannot be restored to what it once was. Roran and the people of Carvajal embody this truth. Having fled their homes, they carry with them the pain of abandonment, the memory of fields left untended, of hearths gone cold. For them, Carvajal was more than a village, it was a nest, a place of belonging woven over generations. Now it lies broken, scattered by the talons of the empire. The people are adrift, no longer farmers or tradesmen, but wanderers forced into exile. Each step away from home feels like another fracture, another reminder that the world they knew has ended. Roran shoulders this grief with grim determination. Though his heart aches for the life stolen from them, he understands that looking back too long will weaken their resolve. He channels his sorrow into leadership, urging his people forward, reminding them that survival demands sacrifice. Yet the burden shows in quiet moments, the way he lingers on memories of Katrina, the bitterness that flickers when he recalls how swiftly the empire shattered their peace. His hammer may give him strength, but it cannot mend the broken egg of their old life. The villagers, too, wrestle with despair. Some long to return despite the danger, clinging to the hope of reclaiming what was lost. Others simmer with anger, vowing vengeance for the destruction of their homes. The group teeters between unity and fracture, and it is Roran's will alone that binds them together. His leadership is tested not only against the Empire, but against the despair within his own people. Saphira and Eragon, though distant from Carvajal, mirror this theme in their own way. They, too, are exiles of a kind, torn from the simplicity of their origins and thrust into a life that cannot be reclaimed. The image of the broken nest resonates with Eragon, reminding him that the past cannot be restored. Like Roran, he must look ahead, forging a new future from the ruins of what was lost. By the end of the chapter, the broken egg and scattered nest stand as symbols not only of what has been destroyed, but of what must be rebuilt. The villagers cannot return to Carvajal as it was, but they can carry its memory forward, shaping their resilience into a weapon sharper than steel. The nest is gone, but from its fragments, something stronger may yet rise. Chapter 48. The Gift of Dragons. In The Gift of Dragons, the story slows its march through turmoil and war to rest upon something rare and luminous. After so many chapters steeped in blood, loss, and political intrigue, this moment is a reminder that not all of Eragon's journey is shadowed. Here, the narrative opens a window into wonder, legacy, and the timeless bond between riders and the dragons who once remade the world. The elves, whose lives stretch back to ages when the riders flourished, are the keepers of many forgotten traditions. In this chapter, Eragon is invited to witness one of those secrets, the gift dragons gave to the world, a legacy hidden not in treasure or conquest, but in memory and spirit. It is not an artifact of war, but a reminder of beginnings, when the bond between dragon and rider was still young, pure, and filled with hope. For Eragon, standing in the presence of this gift feels like touching the roots of his destiny. He sees not only his own struggles reflected, but also the vast lineage he now carries on his shoulders. The dragons were never merely beasts of fire and scale. They were wisdom incarnate, and what they left behind is meant to inspire those who fight for freedom in their absence. The elves speak of it with reverence, their words woven with awe, and even their centuries-old composure cannot mask the power of the moment. Saphira responds with an intensity that Eragon has rarely felt from her. The gift is hers as much as it is his, a living reminder of her kin whose voices are now silent. Through their bond, he feels her pride swell, mingled with grief for all that was lost. The gift becomes a mirror of her spirit, magnificent, fierce, and enduring. For a dragon to share such a legacy is no small thing. It is a promise that the fire of her kind will never be extinguished, so long as even one rider remains to carry it forward. What makes the chapter so striking is not spectacle, but resonance. The gift is not shown as a weapon or a grand display of magic, but as something far subtler. A spark passed across time, a reminder of the nobility and responsibility that binds rider and dragon together. Eragon leaves the moment humbled. The battles to come may drown him in fear and doubt, but this gift ensures he never forgets what he is fighting for. Not only vengeance, not only survival, but the preservation of a bond older and more sacred than any empire. By the end of The Gift of Dragons, Eragon is steadied in ways he did not expect. The moment does not erase his scars or ease the burdens of war, but it gives him clarity. He and Saphira are part of something greater than themselves, a chain unbroken despite the fall of the riders. The gift is both a remembrance and a charge, a quiet flame in the dark, reminding them that they are never truly alone. Chapter 49. In a Starry Glade. In a starry glade unfolds like a breath of stillness between storms. After the weight of councils, the brutality of battles, and the sobering reminders of loss, Eragon finds himself drawn into a place where the world seems to pause. It is not a chapter of conflict, but of reflection, and its beauty lies in how it allows Eragon and the reader to glimpse the fragile peace that still exists in Alagaësia, even as war threatens to engulf it. The glade itself is described with almost reverent detail. Moonlight spills across the clearing, illuminating a canopy of stars so bright and clear that it feels as though the heavens themselves have lowered to touch the earth. Each blade of grass, each leaf shivering in the night air, seems alive with quiet magic. For Eragon, the sight is a balm. He has seen too much blood spilled on the ground, too many fields scorched by cruelty. To stand in a place so untouched, so whole, feels almost like stepping into a dream. Here, away from the gaze of the elves and the constant pull of duty, Eragon allows himself to simply be. He listens to the sounds of the forest, the rustle of branches, the distant calls of night creatures, and feels for the first time in weeks a semblance of peace. The stars above remind him of Garrow's farm, of the nights he spent gazing upward before destiny tore him from the life of a farm boy. The memory is bittersweet, but it roots him, reminding him that no matter how far he travels or how high he climbs, he will always carry Carvajal within him. Saphira shares in the moment with her own kind of wonder. The glade seems to stir something in her that transcends words. She lies beneath the stars with wings outstretched, her scales catching the light, so that she seems a constellation herself, a living piece of the night sky. Through their bond, Eragon feels her pride and her joy, but also her longing, the weight of being one of the last of her kind. To her, the glade is not just peace, but promise. As long as places like this endure, so too can hope for her race. What makes the chapter powerful is how it reframes strength. Eragon realizes that the fight against Galbatorix is not only about defeating a tyrant, but about preserving moments like this. Moments where the world reveals its quiet beauty, where freedom allows life to flourish unscarred. It is a revelation that steadies him, reminding him why the struggle matters beyond vengeance or oaths. He fights not just for survival, but for the right to gaze upon a starry glade without fear. By the end of In a Starry Glade, Eragon emerges renewed. The burdens on his shoulders have not lessened, nor have the dangers ahead grown smaller, but the stillness of the glade has restored something within him. He carries the stars with him now, their light a reminder that even in the darkest of times, beauty can endure, and that beauty is worth protecting. Chapter 50. Landfall. Landfall brings with it a shift in tone, a chapter filled with motion, salt, and the heavy crash of waves. Where the earlier chapters wandered through forests and glades, steeped in magic, this one thrusts us into the raw, untamed realm of the sea. It is a chapter about thresholds, about crossing into new worlds both physically and symbolically, and about the uncertainty that always comes with stepping onto unfamiliar shores. The journey by water is no gentle passage. The sea is vast and indifferent, its moods swinging from calm to violence without warning. To those unaccustomed to it, the endless horizon is both liberating and suffocating, a reminder of how small a person can feel when measured against nature's immensity. The Varden's people, weary from flight and haunted by pursuit, find themselves at the mercy of the waves, each day at sea another test of endurance. Their homes and fields are far behind them, their future uncertain, and the ocean offers no comfort, only the reminder that survival now depends on faith and perseverance. For Roran, the voyage marks a turning point. He has led his people this far with hammer and willpower through mountains, battles, and loss. But on the sea, his strength is tested in a new way. He cannot fight the tides or outstare the horizon. His task is to steady his people's spirits, to keep them focused on the land ahead rather than the fear beneath their feet. His leadership becomes less about action and more about resilience, about being the rock they cling to when everything around them shifts and heaves. Eragon is not present with them, yet the parallel is unmistakable. Just as Roran leads his people across an ocean of water, Eragon is learning to navigate an ocean of destiny, each wave threatening to drag him under. Both cousins are voyagers, both stepping onto shores that will change them forever. Landfall, then, is not only literal, but symbolic. The moment when what was endured behind them becomes foundation for what must come next. When the coast finally appears, relief surges through the weary exiles. The sight of solid earth is more than a promise of rest. It is a confirmation that their sacrifices have not been in vain. Yet even in that relief lies unease. New land brings new dangers, and the Empire's shadow is long. To set foot upon the shore is to acknowledge that their struggle is far from over. Landfall is not arrival at safety, but entry into the next crucible. By the chapter's close, the image of the refugees stepping onto foreign soil lingers like an emblem. Their footprints mark not only a landing, but a declaration. They have endured the sea, and they will endure what comes next. Landfall is a chapter that captures both exhaustion and renewal, the heavy weight of survival and the fragile hope of beginning again. Chapter 51. Tairm. Tairm returns the story to one of Alagaësia's most vibrant coastal cities, a place where salt and trade mingle with politics and secrets. For Roran and his weary band of villagers, the sight of Tairm is more than stone walls and bustling harbors. It is the promise of respite, a brief pause in their desperate flight. Yet, as with all cities touched by the Empire, its safety is fragile, and every street hides its own dangers. The city is alive with motion. Ships creak in the harbor, gulls scream overhead, and merchants cry out their wares in a dozen languages. To the villagers, who have known only the quiet rhythms of Carvajal and the wild uncertainty of their journey, Tairm is overwhelming. Its noise, its size, and its constant press of strangers remind them how far they have traveled from the simplicity of their home. For some, it sparks awe. For others, it deepens the ache of displacement. Roran walks its streets with the unyielding focus of a man carrying the weight of every soul who followed him. His mind is never far from Katrina, still lost to him, nor from the relentless pursuit of the Empire. Even as he marvels at the city's scale, he scans every corner for threats, every unfamiliar face for betrayal. To him, Tairm is not a wonder, but an opportunity, a place where allies may be found, where the next step of their journey might be secured, if only he can navigate its complexities. The city also stirs memory, for Tairm is not new to the family. Eragon once walked these very streets with Brom, unraveling mysteries and tasting the danger that would one day define his life. Though Roran does not know the details of those journeys, there is a sense of threads converging again in this coastal stronghold. The fate of the cousins, though separated, continues to entwine across the map of Alagaësia. For the villagers, Tairm is a test of trust. Some are dazzled by its possibilities, longing for rest, food, and the simple comforts of city life. Others remain wary, remembering too well how quickly safety can crumble. Roran must balance both impulses, reminding them that survival demands vigilance even in moments of respite. His role as leader is not to grant them the illusion of safety, but to guide them through its dangers with steady resolve. By the end of the term, the city has revealed itself not as a sanctuary, but as a stage for the next chapter of their struggle. Its walls, its bustling harbor, and its crowded markets are both shield and trap, offering chances for alliance, but also risks of betrayal. The villagers' arrival here is not an ending, but a pause, a moment to gather strength before the road ahead resumes. Tirm stands as both reminder and warning. No matter how far they run, the shadow of the Empire stretches still. Chapter 52. Geod Longshanks. Geod Longshanks marks a reunion steeped in history, one that ties Roran's desperate present to the shadowed past of his cousin Eragon. Geod, the seasoned merchant and reluctant conspirator against the Empire, steps once more into the tale, not as a figure of wealth or influence, but as a man bound by friendship, loyalty, and the risks that come with defiance. Roran and his weary band find in Geod not the polished image of a prosperous trader, but someone scarred by years of danger and compromise. His home, his livelihood, and even his health bear the marks of his quiet rebellion. Yet behind the weathered exterior remains the sharp mind and resourceful spirit that once aided Brom and Eragon on their early quests. For Roran, meeting Geod is like stepping into the echoes of stories half heard, fragments of his cousin's journey suddenly given shape in the man who helped guide it. Geod greets them with warmth, though it is tempered by caution. To harbor fugitives so openly is to invite the wrath of the Empire, and he knows better than most the price of discovery. Still, his loyalty outweighs his fear. He welcomes them into his home, offering more than shelter. He offers knowledge, contacts, and the subtle wisdom of one who has long walked the knife's edge between survival and resistance. His presence is a reminder that rebellion is not always fought with swords. Sometimes it endures in books, in whispers, in the quiet sheltering of those hunted by tyranny. For Roran, Geod becomes both ally and mirror. He sees in the older man what defiance looks like when tempered by age, patience, and compromise. It is not the fiery rage of the battlefield, but the enduring ember that refuses to die, no matter how fiercely the Empire blows against it. The contrast sharpens Roran's own resolve, reminding him that leadership must take many forms, and that not all battles are won by brute force. The villagers, too, draw strength from Geod's presence. In him, they see proof that not everyone in the great cities has bent to Galbatorix's will. His willingness to risk himself for them becomes a balm to their weariness, renewing their faith that their struggle is not isolated but part of a larger tapestry of resistance stretching across Alagaësia. By the close of Geod Longshanks, the chapter hums with the quiet power of alliance. Geod may not wield a sword or ride a dragon, but his knowledge and loyalty prove as valuable as any weapon. Through him, the ties between past and present weave tighter, binding Eragon's journey to Roran's and reminding us that every act of courage, no matter how small, feeds the fire of rebellion. Chapter 53. An Unexpected Ally. Teyrm's streets are thick with salt and rumor, the sort of place where a wrong glance can sell you to the Empire, and where, if luck holds, a single handshake can change the course of 100 lives. Roran arrives with nothing to trade but resolve, and it is Geod, still a quiet axis of rebellion, who turns that resolve into opportunity. What they need isn't comfort or coin. They need a door that won't slam the instant the Empire leans on it. The ally who appears is not the sort that inspires confidence at first sight. Hardened by tides and taxes, suspicious to the marrow, they have every reason to refuse fugitives carrying trouble like baggage. Yet the same currents that have scoured this person's conscience have also carved a private hatred of imperial power. Beneath the gruff bargaining and narrowed eyes lies a decision already tilting toward defiance. Jawad knows how to nudge, one story here, one reminder there, a careful appeal to pride, and Roran seals the pitch with the only currency he owns outright: the promise that he will see his people through, or break trying. What follows is less a pact than a test. Terms are argued in whispers, routes sketched with a finger on a tabletop gone sticky with brine. Every contingency has a shadow, patrols, tariffs, and informants, and every solution demands a risk someone else must shoulder. Roran feels the weight of it, a leader asking others to endanger themselves for a cause that isn't theirs. But the allies' gaze lingers on the villagers, on the children too exhausted to be afraid, and the elders who refuse to be left behind. And something in that sight finishes what Jihad's persuasion began. The agreement is struck, not with flourish, but with a quiet nod that carries more weight than any oath. For Roran, the moment is both relief and reckoning. He learns a different shape of courage, not the hammer-swinging fury that drove soldiers from Carvajal, but the steadier bravery of trust, of handing his people to another's skill and conscience. He also recognizes the cost of leadership in a new light. Every favor owed is a tether, every ally a mirror that will later look back and ask whether his promises were worth the danger they embraced. Jihad watches it all with the air of a man who has lived too long in the gray between commerce and conspiracy. He takes no victory from the deal, only a deeper weariness and a steadier fire. If rebellion survives, it will be because moments like this thread themselves together across the map. A merchant risking his name, a captain bending a rule, a harbor master looking away at the right hour. Empires crack not only under armies, but under the quiet accumulation of small defiances. By night's end, Roran steps back into the wind of the docks with something he has not held since Carvajal burned: a path. It is narrow, dangerous, and paid for by the faith of someone who owed him nothing. But it is a path all the same. The unexpected ally fades into the fog of Term's harbor, and the village's future tilts, almost imperceptibly, toward the sea. Chapter 54. Escape. Escape pulses with urgency from its first breath. After long stretches of planning, loss, and uneasy alliances, the narrative erupts into action once more, as the walls of safety prove thin, and the Empire's grip presses too close. This chapter is not about quiet reflection, but about the raw, desperate need to break free, before the jaws of capture close forever. The moment builds like a storm. Roran and his people, weary from the long road and the precarious aid of strangers, find themselves once again staring at the threat of entrapment. The Empire's eyes are everywhere: guards, informants, and whispers, and the very air of Term feels heavy with suspicion. Even as they try to grasp a sliver of respite, danger crowds in, reminding them that survival in Galbatorix's world means never standing still. The escape itself is chaotic, yet purposeful. Roran channels his steady, unyielding will into swift action, guiding his people with the same certainty that once held a village together against raiders. The villagers, hardened now by trials and flight, move not as farmers but as fugitives with a cause, their courage sharpened by desperation. Each step they take away from the Empire's grasp is a small act of rebellion, proof that their spirit has not yet broken. Eragon's presence looms invisibly over the chapter, though his path lies elsewhere. His cousin's defiance mirrors his own, and in their parallel struggles, the story reminds us that rebellion takes many forms. Where Eragon wields blade and magic, Roran wields cunning, loyalty, and the strength of ordinary people refusing to yield. Both kinds of resistance are essential, each feeding the larger tide that rises against tyranny. What makes the chapter burn so vividly is not just the flight itself, but what it reveals about transformation. The villagers are no longer simply running, they are escaping with purpose, every stride driven by the conviction that freedom, though fragile, is worth every risk. Roran, at the front, feels the weight of their trust, and knows that failure is no longer an option. Their escape is more than a flight from danger. It is a step toward becoming part of the rebellion itself. By the end of escape, the air still crackles with tension. They are free, but only just, with the threat of pursuit lingering like a shadow on their heels. Yet the chapter closes not in despair, but in resilience. Against all odds, they have slipped through the cracks of the Empire's net once more. Every escape makes them stronger. Every narrow survival binds them tighter. The story reminds us that while Galbatorix commands armies and riders, true power lies in the will of those who refuse to be caged. Chapter 55. Child's Play. Child's Play opens with a startling contrast to the danger and desperation of the escape. After the pounding of feet, the clash of arms, and the taste of fear, the narrative slows to reveal something deceptively simple: children at play. Yet in this fleeting image lies one of the most poignant reminders of what is at stake in the war against Galbatorix. For a moment, the villagers' flight brings them past a quiet space where children, untouched by the full weight of tyranny, laugh and chase one another. Their games are innocent, their voices ringing with a joy that feels alien in a world so steeped in loss. To the weary fugitives, the sight strikes like a balm and a blade all at once. It is a glimpse of what has been lost in Carvajal, what might yet be preserved if their struggle succeeds, and what will vanish forever if it fails. Roran is most deeply moved. The laughter of the young sharpens his grief for the life he might have shared with Katrina, for the children they might have raised together in peace. Yet it also steels his resolve. He understands that his fight is no longer only for vengeance or survival. It is for the fragile promise of childhood itself. In the games of these children, he sees the purest reason to resist, so that innocence can endure in a world bent on crushing it. For the villagers, too, the moment cuts deeply. Their children have grown up too quickly, hardened by hunger and flight, stripped of the careless joy that once defined youth. To watch others play freely is to feel both envy and determination. It is a reminder that they carry their own young with them into a future that must be made safe, no matter the cost. Though Eragon is absent from this scene, his own journey is echoed here. His battles, his training, his pursuit of strength, all of it is bound to this same truth: the preservation of life untainted by cruelty. Saphira, if present, would have rumbled with approval, for dragons, in their way, are guardians of beginnings. They understand that the measure of strength is not in destruction, but in what it protects. The chapter ends with the villagers pressing on, the sound of laughter fading behind them, but lingering in their hearts. Child's Play is brief yet powerful, a reminder that even amid war, life insists on itself. It is in such fragile moments that the meaning of resistance crystallizes, not for glory, not even for revenge, but for the simple right of children to run, laugh, and live without fear. Chapter 56. Premonition of War. Premonition of War shifts the story's rhythm once again, darkening the air with foreboding. Where child's play offered a fleeting glimpse of innocence, this chapter reminds us that such moments are fragile, fleeting sparks before the storm. War, once spoken of in distant tones, now presses closer, its inevitability settling over both Eragon and Roran like a shroud. Eragon, still among the elves, feels it first, not in words, but in the restless silence of Du Veldenvarden. Training continues, yet every lesson is weighted by urgency, as though Oromis and Islanzadi sense that their time to prepare him is running short. Whispers of movement ripple through their sacred forest, carried not only by scouts, but by the very trees themselves, whose ancient presence seems to tighten with unease. Eragon dreams of battlefields and wakes with the taste of ash on his tongue, knowing that destiny stirs beyond his control. Roran, far from the elves, experiences the premonition differently. His journey with the villagers is haunted by the awareness that every step they take draws them nearer to the front lines. The safe havens grow fewer, the eyes of the Empire grow sharper, and the weight of expectation grows heavier. He too dreams of blood and fire, visions that blur the line between memory of past violence and prophecy of what's to come. His people feel it as well. Every laugh is shorter, every rest uneasy, every face shadowed by fear they cannot yet name. The chapter is not loud. It does not explode with fire or clash with steel. Instead, its power lies in stillness, in the quiet dread of those who know that war approaches like a storm on the horizon. Oromis speaks plainly. War cannot be avoided, only endured, and Eragon must be ready to fight not only with strength, but with conviction. For Roran, the knowledge is harsher. His people will not only witness the storm, but be swept up in it, and he must lead them through with no dragon or ancient mentor to shield them. Saphira's presence sharpens the chapter's tension. She senses war not as premonition, but as instinct, her scales itching with anticipation, her fire restless in her belly. Through their bond, Eragon feels her certainty. Battle is near, and when it comes, it will demand everything they have. Yet even she does not know whether they will emerge whole. By the end of Premonition of War, the tone of the story has shifted irrevocably. Hope still lingers, but it is now tempered by dread, as all roads bend toward conflict. The characters stand on the cusp of a great upheaval, the kind that will decide not only their fates, but the fate of Alagaësia itself. The storm has not yet broken, but its thunder can already be heard in the distance. Chapter 57. Red Blade, White Blade. Red Blade. White Blade is a chapter steeped in the imagery of combat, where steel becomes not just a weapon, but a symbol. The clash of blades in this moment is more than training or skirmish. It is the embodiment of choices, allegiances, and the fragile balance between survival and annihilation. The name itself suggests contrast: red for blood, violence, and passion, white for purity, discipline, and the cold finality of death. Within this stark imagery, Eragon finds himself caught in a confrontation that tests not only his strength, but his understanding of what it means to fight. The duel he faces is swift and unrelenting, each strike forcing him to balance instinct against the refined lessons drilled into him by Oromis. His opponent's blade, relentless, precise, feels like a physical manifestation of all the threats looming over him: Galbatorix's cruelty, Murtagh's betrayal, the merciless advance of the Empire. Eragon's red blade, fueled by passion and desperation, seeks to overwhelm. The white blade, cool and calculated, seeks to contain and destroy. For long moments, the battle teeters between them, neither yielding, the ring of steel echoing like thunderclaps through the trees. Saphira watches with feral intensity, her growls vibrating in Eragon's chest. To her, the duel is not merely practice, it is a vision of the struggles to come, a warning of the thin line between triumph and loss. She urges him through their bond not to surrender to fear, not to let hesitation guide his hand. Her fire steadies him, reminding him that passion, when disciplined, is not weakness, but strength sharpened to a fine edge. The fight ends not in death, but in revelation. Eragon realizes that neither red nor white alone can carry him forward. Rage without discipline burns out too quickly. Discipline without passion grows brittle and cold. To win, he must forge a new path, a blade that unites the fire of red and the clarity of white, strength born not of extremes, but of balance. By the close of red blade, white blade, Eragon carries more than bruises and sweat. He carries insight, that every battle he faces will be fought not only against enemies, but against the conflicting forces within himself. To be rider is to unite them, to fight with heart and mind, fire and ice, red and white together. Only then can his blade strike true in the battles that await. Chapter 58. Visions Near and Far. Visions Near and Far is a chapter draped in mystery, where the threads of destiny tighten and the unseen world presses closer to the lives of mortals. Here, the ordinary boundaries of time and distance blur, as glimpses of the future and whispers from afar intrude upon the present. What emerges is not clarity, but unease, a reminder that knowledge can be both a gift and a burden. For Eragon, the visions come suddenly, unbidden. In the quiet of meditation and the stillness of elven magic, images flicker before his mind's eye, battlefields soaked in blood, shadows moving across plains, faces both familiar and strange. Some are sharp enough to chill him to the bone, warriors falling, banners burning, eyes that glow with cruelty. Others are blurred, more suggestion than certainty, like ripples on the surface of a pond disturbed by wind. He cannot tell which are warnings, which are possibilities, and which are simply dreams conjured by his fears. The elves treat these visions with gravity. To them, foresight is a dangerous tool. Useful, yes, but never absolute. They warn him that what he sees may not be fate, but potential, and that obsession with visions can twist choices rather than clarify them. Oromis reminds him that the present, not the future, is the soil from which all outcomes grow. Eragon listens, but the weight of what he has seen gnaws at him, each vision leaving behind a lingering shadow. Roran, far away, feels a different kind of vision, one grounded not in magic, but in instinct. As he leads his villagers, he senses danger gathering ahead, a certainty born not of spells, but of lived struggle. His premonitions lack detail, yet they are no less true. He knows in his bones that the road to safety will not remain clear much longer, that the Empire's hand is stretching toward them even as they march. His visions are nearer, immediate, tied to the survival of his people in each passing day. Saphira views the matter with her own dragon clarity. She is skeptical of visions, for to her the future is like the sky, vast, shifting, never fixed. Yet even she feels the pulse of unease through their bond, the sense that forces beyond sight are moving against them. Her reassurance to Eragon is simple. No vision, no prophecy, no shadow of what might be can strip them of the present moment they share, nor of the choices they make together. By the close of visions near and far, The chapter lingers not on answers, but on questions. The visions illuminate much, but resolve little, leaving Eragon and the others with the unsettling knowledge that the future presses close, yet remains maddeningly out of reach. What is certain is that the war ahead will not be fought in steel alone. It will also unfold in shadows, dreams, and glimpses of what may yet come. Chapter 59. Gifts. Gifts unfold with a rare tenderness amid the looming specter of war. Where so much of the tale has been filled with steel and fire, this chapter softens into a meditation on generosity, on the strength of bonds expressed not through bloodshed, but through what one heart chooses to give another. The timing makes every exchange heavier, for the characters know that war waits close at hand, and any gift may be the last offered before the storm. In Ellésmera, Eragon finds himself both humbled and overwhelmed by the elves' offerings. Their gifts are not trinkets nor luxuries, but items woven with meaning and power, objects designed to steady his hand, shield his body, or remind him of truths greater than himself. Each carries with it a fragment of elven culture, a blend of beauty and practicality that reveals their reverence for him as a rider, and for Saphira, as a living link to a vanished age. What strikes him most is not their craftsmanship, though it dazzles, but the sincerity behind each gesture, the quiet recognition that they are entrusting part of their strength to him. Saphira receives her share as well, and her joy is palpable. To the elves, she is not merely Eragon's companion, but a being of near-sacred significance. Their gifts to her honor both dragonkind and the bond that binds her to her rider. She accepts them with dignity, though Eragon feels the warmth of her pride bubbling through their bond. Pride, not in the objects themselves, but in the respect they signify. For her, the truest gift is recognition, the affirmation that she and her kin are not forgotten. Far from the forest, Roran experiences another form of giving. Among his weary villagers, generosity takes shape in smaller but no less profound ways. A crust of bread shared, a cloak draped across shivering shoulders, a parent sacrificing rest to carry a child. These modest offerings lack the enchantment of elven craft, yet they carry equal weight, for they are born from necessity and love. For Roran, such gifts remind him that leadership is not only about victories won, but about sustaining hope in the smallest, most human acts. What ties these threads together is the awareness that every gift is also a responsibility. Eragon feels the weight of the elves' faith pressing upon him, as though each item binds him more tightly to the destiny he cannot escape. Roran, too, senses that every sacrifice his people make for one another strengthens his duty to protect them. In a world teetering on the brink of chaos, these gifts are not only comforts, but also quiet burdens, reminders of what must not be squandered. By the end of gifts, the air is thick with gratitude, solemnity, and unspoken fear. Each gift shines not only as a token of affection or loyalty, but as a spark of light against the gathering darkness. The chapter closes with the understanding that war will demand everything, yet it is precisely in what they choose to give, great or small, that true strength is revealed. Chapter 60. The Maw of the Ocean. The Maw of the Ocean pulls the story from the safety of forests and halls into the wild, unpredictable vastness of the sea. Where the land has offered shelter, however fragile, the ocean presents itself as both opportunity and threat, a living force indifferent to the struggles of men. For Roran and the villagers, this chapter is a plunge into the unknown, where their courage is tested not against soldiers or steel, but against the merciless will of nature. The sea looms before them, immense and terrifying, its waves like the jaws of some vast beast, the maw that can swallow ships, lives, and hope in a single motion. To those who have never left the mountain-ringed valley of Carvajal, the sight is overwhelming. The ocean is not just water. It is freedom and peril entwined. A promise of escape from the empire, but also a reminder that survival is never guaranteed. Roran feels the full weight of the choice pressing on him. To set his people upon the sea is to trade one form of danger for another. The empire's reach may not extend so easily over open waters, yet the ocean has no mercy, no allegiance, no compassion. Still, he knows there is no turning back. To linger on land is to invite pursuit and certain ruin. The maw must be entered, or all their struggles will have been for nothing. The villagers steel themselves, their fear mingling with a fragile determination. They clamber aboard ships with trembling hands, their gazes fixed on the horizon, each of them aware that they are stepping into a realm utterly alien. For many, it is their first time leaving solid earth behind, and the rocking of the deck beneath their feet feels like betrayal. Yet they trust Roran, drawing strength from the same hammer that once defended them in Carvajal, and now guides them into the waves. The sea itself becomes a character here. Winds shriek, salt stings their lips, waves crash like blows from an unseen giant. Every groan of wood and snap of sail reminds them that they are at the mercy of forces far greater than their own. Roran, though resolute, feels humbled. He can battle soldiers and outwit foes, but against the maw of the ocean, his leadership is measured not in strength, but in faith. Faith that they can endure together. By the close of the maw of the ocean, the villagers have embarked upon a journey as perilous as any battlefield. Behind them lie their homes and the certainty of the empire's pursuit. Before them stretches an endless expanse where survival will depend on courage, unity, and no small measure of luck. The chapter ends with the sea swallowing the horizon, the maw closing around them, and the unspoken question hanging in the salt-thick air. Will they endure the ocean's hunger, or be consumed by it? Chapter 61. Running the Boar's Eye. Running the Boar's Eye plunges Roran and the villagers deeper into the peril of the sea, where survival hinges on grit, instinct, and sheer willpower. If the maw of the ocean was about stepping into danger, this chapter is about being swallowed by it, about facing the kind of storm that strips men of bravado and leaves only raw determination. The Boar's Eye is no ordinary tempest. It is a storm so fierce that sailors speak of it with reverence, half as legend, half as curse. When its black clouds gather on the horizon and the wind begins to howl, even the most seasoned seafarers pale. To the villagers, who have never before braved the sea, it feels like the wrath of the gods themselves. The waves rise like mountains, crashing against the ship with violence that threatens to splinter it into driftwood. Lightning tears the sky open, and thunder shakes their bones as though the world itself were roaring. Roran stands at the center of it, battered by salt and spray, his knuckles white as he clings to rigging and rail alike. He is no sailor, but leadership cannot falter. Not even here. Every scream of terror from his people drives him harder, pushing him to lend his strength where he can, hauling ropes, steadying masts, shouting orders he barely understands, but knows must be given. In that chaos, his hammer is useless, yet his presence alone steadies them. He becomes the anchor they cling to, not because he commands the sea, but because he refuses to yield to it. The villagers, tossed and broken by the storm, reveal their mettle. Some collapse in fear, Others fight desperately to hold the ship together, each of them drawn into the collective struggle against a force beyond comprehension. What began as a band of farmers and shepherds now looks like a crew forged in crisis, each action a stitch that binds them more tightly as a people. Their survival depends not on any one individual, but on their ability to endure as one body against the storm's fury. The boar's eye does not relent quickly. Hours bleed into an endless cycle of shrieking winds and crashing waves. Roran feels despair bite at him, yet he draws strength from the memory of Carvajal, from the oath he silently carries to protect those who followed him. To give in would be to betray them. His defiance, though small against the storm's enormity, becomes the spark that keeps them fighting. By the time the storm begins to break, the ship is battered, sails torn, bodies bruised and exhausted. Yet they still live. The boar's eye has not claimed them, though it has left its mark on their ship, their spirits, and their understanding of themselves. Running the boar's eye ends not with triumph, but with grim relief. The villagers collapsing into silence as the sea calms, each of them knowing they have faced the maw and lived. Survival, for now, is victory. Chapter 62. To Aberon. To Aberon carries the weight of exhaustion and expectation as Roran and the villagers finally turn their eyes toward the land again. After the terror of the boar's eye, the sight of solid earth should bring only relief. Yet this chapter reminds us that stepping onto shore does not mean stepping into safety. Aberon, a city of men, promises refuge, but also uncertainty, politics, and the lurking shadow of the empire. The approach to the city is heavy with tension. The villagers, battered by sea and storm, gaze at Aberon's towers with awe and trepidation. For those who have never traveled farther than Carvajal's fields, the sight of a great port city rising from the horizon feels almost overwhelming. The walls glint in the sun, sturdy and proud, a symbol of human ambition. Ships crowd the harbor, banners fluttering, merchants shouting from the docks. Yet beneath the bustle lies danger. In cities, secrets thrive, and spies of Galbatorix walk as freely as honest traders. Roran feels the burden more than anyone. He has led his people through fire, blood, and storm. But now leadership takes a new form. It is no longer about swinging his hammer or holding fast against nature. It is about negotiating, persuading, and ensuring his people are not swallowed by the labyrinth of Aberon's politics. The villagers look to him, as always, their trust unshaken, but he knows one misstep in this city could undo everything they have fought for. Aberon itself hums with life, and Paolini paints it as both magnificent and menacing. Its streets are crowded with peddlers hawking wares, soldiers patrolling in crisp formation, and beggars haunting alleys. It is a city alive with ambition, where wealth and ruin walk side by side. To the villagers, who have lived by the rhythm of harvests and seasons, it feels foreign, almost hostile. They clutch their belongings tighter, their eyes darting nervously as they follow Roran deeper into its heart. The chapter's power lies in the shift of perspective. After battles fought in villages and storms at sea, the struggle now moves into the realm of diplomacy and survival amid human structures. Roran recognizes that strength alone will not protect them here. He must learn to navigate this world of walls, gates, and whispered bargains, or risk losing the very people he swore to defend. By the end of To Aberon, the villagers stand on the threshold of a new chapter in their exile. The sea is behind them, but what lies ahead is no less daunting. The promise of safety glimmers, Yet it is shadowed by the knowledge that Galbatorix's reach is long, and even within strong stone walls, danger waits. Eberron may offer opportunity, but it will test them in ways brute force cannot solve. Chapter 63. The Burning Plains. The Burning Plains ignites the narrative with a scale of battle unlike anything seen before. Here, the great war that has loomed in whispers and premonitions finally erupts in full, a clash vast enough to shake the land itself. The chapter is thick with smoke, blood, and the roar of armies, carrying the reader into the chaos where strategy collapses, and only willpower can hold the line. Eragon and Saphira arrive to find the world aflame. The plains stretch wide, scorched by fire and littered with bodies, banners whipping in the poisoned wind. The heat is suffocating, rising from both the sun and the flames of war, until the very air seems to shimmer with violence. Thousands of soldiers swarm across the battlefield, their armor gleaming dully beneath ash and soot, their shouts and cries colliding in a single, terrible cacophony. This is not the skirmishes of Carvajal, nor the training grounds of Du Veldenvarden. It is war in its fullest, rawest form. Eragon feels the shock of it in his bones. Even with all his training, the sight unsettles him, reminding him that no lessons in swordplay or wisdom could truly prepare him for the enormity of battle. Here, men die not as individuals but as waves broken against one another. He must steady himself, drawing on Saphira's presence, her fire and fury, to hold back despair. Together, they hurl themselves into the fray, dragon and rider blazing like a storm against the tide. The chapter brims with desperate clashes. Saphira's wings darken the sky, her fire searing swathes of enemies, while Eragon's blade flashes as he carves through soldiers, every strike a reminder of both his power and his responsibility. Yet even they cannot turn the tide alone. The Varden strain beneath the Empire's relentless push, their lines buckling, their courage tested to breaking. Nasuada commands with fierce determination, rallying her forces even as exhaustion drags at them. Then comes the turning point, the arrival of Roran and the villagers, their unexpected presence a jolt of hope. Roran, hammer in hand, charges into the chaos with a ferocity that inspires those around him. His people, hardened by their journey, fight not as trained soldiers, but as men and women who have nothing left to lose. Their defiance cuts through despair, binding them to the larger struggle. For the first time, the paths of Eragon and Roran converge not in memory, but in shared battle, their fates woven together on the smoking plains. The battle, however, is not without horror. The Empire's forces reveal their merciless might, pressing forward with sorcery and steel, and Eragon learns the sobering truth that no victory comes without devastating loss. The ground itself seems to weep with the blood spilled upon it, the air choked with screams and ash. The burning plains are not only a battlefield, but a graveyard, each flame a reminder of how fragile life is under tyranny's weight. By the end of the burning plains, the outcome of the battle remains uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the war has entered a new, unrelenting phase. Eragon, Saphira, Roran, and Nasuada all stand tested, their strength tempered by fire and loss. The plains burn behind them, but their resolve hardens within the inferno. The fight against Galbatorix is far from over, and its cost will only rise. Chapter 64. The Clouds of War. The clouds of war settle over the story like a heavy shroud after the inferno of the burning plains. The battle has not ended the conflict, It has only revealed how much larger and more brutal the struggle will become. This chapter slows the furious rhythm of combat into the tense silence of aftermath, where survivors reckon with what has been lost and brace for what lies ahead. The plains still smolder, their smoke curling upward to blot the sun, turning daylight into a grim twilight. Soldiers stumble among the dead, searching for comrades, dragging the wounded to safety, whispering the names of those who will never rise again. The air reeks of blood and ash, the ground blackened and churned by hoof, claw, and fire. Victory, if it can be claimed at all, tastes hollow. For Eragon, the weight of the battle presses into his chest like a stone. He has fought with all his strength, pouring magic and steel into the struggle, yet he cannot escape the faces of the fallen. He feels keenly the truth that even a rider cannot protect everyone. Each life lost whispers in his mind, echoing his fear of inadequacy. Saphira, too, is subdued. Though her fire and might blazed brightly in battle, she mourns for the charred earth and the broken bodies, her deep dragon heart aching at the cost of survival. Through their bond, Eragon feels her grief mixing with his own, a shared sorrow that binds them tighter, even as it threatens to overwhelm. Nasuada carries the burden differently. As leader of the Varden, she must look beyond grief, though it cuts her no less deeply. She walks among her soldiers, offering words of comfort, her presence steady amid the devastation. To them, she is the anchor, the one who cannot falter even when the clouds of war gather so thickly overhead. In her silence, in her grief-stricken eyes, she knows the truth. This is only the beginning. The Empire's strength remains vast, and today's survival ensures only that the Varden will face tomorrow's storm. Roran, hammer still stained, emerges from the battle changed yet again. He has proven himself not only as a fighter, but as a leader whose people can stand beside armies and hold their ground. Yet he, too, feels the sorrow of the cost, the knowledge that each step forward is paved with blood. For him, the clouds of war are personal, for he carries not only the weight of the rebellion, but the pain of Katrina's absence, her memory haunting him even in fleeting moments of triumph. By the close of the clouds of war, the chapter leaves the battlefield behind, but not the heaviness it has cast upon the characters. The horizon is no longer bright with fire, but dark with the smoke of war, a constant reminder that peace is far away. The clouds gather not only in the sky, but in the hearts of those who must fight on. The war is not nearing its end. It is only deepening, promising storms fiercer than any yet faced. Chapter 65. Nar-Garzvog. Nar-Garzvog brings a surprising shift in the tides of the rebellion, pulling Eragon into a world of unlikely alliances. The chapter centers on his encounter with Nar-Garzvog, the cool war chief of the Urgals, and the uneasy bridge that begins to form between enemies who have spilled one another's blood for generations. Eragon approaches the meeting with deep mistrust, memories of Yazuak and the slaughtered villagers etched into his mind. To him, Urgals have always been the face of brutality, hulking warriors driven by savagery. Yet Nar-Garzvog stands differently. He is massive and intimidating, his horns catching the light like the blades of a crown, but behind his eyes lies not only ferocity, but intelligence and pride. His presence demands respect, not just fear. The meeting is tense, laced with the echoes of battles past. Words are cautious, edged with suspicion, as both sides struggle to look beyond blood feuds. For Eragon, the weight of Brahm's death and the countless slain presses heavily on him. To treat with Urgals feels like betrayal to those memories. Yet he listens, urged by Oromas's lessons in wisdom and diplomacy, and slowly perceives that Nar-Garsvog seeks something more than destruction. The cool leader offers an alliance, a chance to stand against Galbatorix together. What makes the chapter powerful is its honesty about the cost of such a bargain. Trust cannot be conjured in a single conversation, nor can history be erased by words alone. The Varden recoil at the thought of Urgals as allies, their hatred and fear running deep. Yet Nar-Garsvog does not flinch from their scorn. He acknowledges the blood spilled, but insists that their true enemy is the Empire, whose cruelty enslaves even his people. His defiance against Galbatorix burns as fiercely as any human's, and it is this common fire that Eragon begins to recognize. Saphira is wary, her instincts sharp against the presence of Urgals, but even she senses the truth in Nar-Garsvog's words. To her, honor and strength are languages as old as dragonkind, and she sees both in him. Through her, Eragon begins to temper his mistrust, realizing that sometimes the most powerful allies are born not from friendship, but from necessity. By the end of Nar-Garsvog, a fragile understanding has been struck. It is not yet trust, nor is it forgiveness, but it is a beginning. Eragon learns that victory against Galbatorix will demand more than valor and fire. It will demand unity among peoples long divided by hatred. The chapter closes with the image of enemies standing face to face, not as friends, but as warriors choosing to bear the same burden against a tyrant greater than them both. Chapter 66. Witch's Brew. Witch's Brew shifts the tone from the thunder of armies and the weight of alliances into the strange and uncanny, pulling the reader into the world of magic that defies reason. Here, the rebellion brushes against forces older and more enigmatic than swords or dragons, forces that remind everyone that the war against Galbatorix is not fought only on fields of blood, but also in shadows, whispers, and cauldrons that simmer with secrets. The chapter centers on Angela, the eccentric herbalist whose wit is as sharp as any blade, and whose knowledge is deep enough to unsettle even the elves. In her cluttered chamber, where dried herbs hang thick in the air and strange concoctions bubble in crooked pots, she brews remedies and mysteries alike. To the Varden, her work seems half miracle, half madness, but to those who know better, Angela embodies the blurred line between wisdom and chaos. It is here that Eragon and Naswada encounter the strange alchemy of her craft. Angela speaks in riddles, tossing off prophecies as casually as one might stir a pot, her words unsettling in their playful ambiguity. Each brew she offers is more than a potion. It is a piece of knowledge, a twist of fate, a reminder that the future can be nudged, but never fully controlled. She insists that truth and destiny often come in the form of bitter medicine, swallowed reluctantly but necessary all the same. Beside her, Solumbum prowls, his werecat eyes glimmering with an unsettling awareness. His presence turns the moment heavier, for he speaks less often, but with a gravity that pierces through the haze of Angela's humor. When he chooses to speak, it is with cryptic counsel that hints at paths Eragon has yet to tread, warnings that linger long after the words fade. The combination of Angela's mischief and Solumbum's solemnity creates a balance of playfulness and dread that leaves both Rider and Varden unsettled. The brew itself becomes a symbol. Whether as healing or foresight, it carries the taste of risk. Bitter, unpredictable, but undeniably potent. Those who partake of it do so with caution, aware that knowledge and power always carry hidden costs. For Eragon, the encounter is another lesson. that wisdom does not always arrive dressed in solemn robes or spoken with grave authority. Sometimes it comes cackling over a steaming pot, laughing at the folly of heroes even as it hands them the keys to survival. By the end of Witch's Brew, the Varden leave Angela's chambers both unsettled and strangely fortified. They carry no clear answers, only riddles and warnings, but also a reminder that the rebellion is not alone. Strange allies walk among them, witches, werecats, and forces beyond mortal comprehension, all threading their influence into the war's outcome. The taste of the brew lingers, sharp and unforgettable, much like the truths hidden in Angela's riddles. Chapter 67. The Storm Breaks. The storm breaks erupts with a ferocity that sweeps away all moments of stillness. What has been foreshadowed in whispers, dreams, and uneasy silences now arrives in full, a tempest of steel, fire, and blood. The title is no metaphor. It is the storm of war itself, breaking at last upon the plains where the Varden and their allies stand. The chapter opens with an eerie calm. Soldiers sharpen blades, adjust armor, murmur prayers to forgotten gods. The air is heavy, oppressive, as though the very sky holds its breath. Then the first horns sound, and the horizon darkens, not with clouds, but with the advance of Galbatorix's forces, their banners unfurling like thunderheads. The storm has come, and there is no more waiting. When the clash begins, it is sudden and overwhelming. The Empire's army strikes with precision and savagery, their lines crashing against the Vardens with the force of a tidal wave. Eragon and Saphira soar into the chaos, dragonfire cutting arcs through the battlefield, Eragon's blade gleaming as he carves a path through the press of enemies. The roar of war drowns out thought, leaving only instinct and the unrelenting demand to survive. But the storm is not merely physical, it is emotional. Eragon feels the swell of fear among the Varden, the cries of the wounded, the despair that ripples like lightning through their ranks. He must become not only a warrior but a beacon, his presence on the field a symbol that steadies faltering courage. Saphira, majestic and terrible, becomes the embodiment of defiance, her wings blotting out the sky, her fire blazing against the darkness. The chapter does not flinch from the cost. Blood soaks the ground, the air thickens with smoke, and friends fall alongside foes. Roran, hammer in hand, fights with desperate fury among his people, his determination no less vital than Eragon's magic. Nasuada commands from behind the lines, her voice cutting through panic, her will holding the rebellion together, even as it strains against collapse. Each of them carries their share of the storm, proving that war demands everything: strength, courage, sacrifice. By the close of the storm breaks, the battlefield is chaos incarnate. Victory is uncertain, survival precarious. Yet amid the ruin, one truth shines. The storm has come, and the Varden still stand, bloodied but unbroken. The storm may batter them, may strip away innocence and hope, but it cannot wash away their defiance. The war has entered its fiercest stage, and from here, nothing will remain untouched. Chapter 68. Convergence. Convergence carries the weight of inevitability. After storms of blood and fire, the scattered threads of the story, Roran's march of desperation, Nasuada's iron rule of the Varden, Eragon's struggle toward strength, and the Empire's relentless pursuit, are pulled together into a single knot. This chapter is less about movement than about collision. The moment when destinies long circling each other finally draw into alignment. The battlefield becomes the stage for this convergence. Smoke still rises from the plains. Bodies lie in mute testimony, Yet new banners gather on the horizon. The Varden, weary and battered, look to their leaders for guidance, knowing that survival now rests not on chance, but on unity. Naswada, unshaken, calls her commanders to her side, weaving the different voices of men, dwarves, and even Urgles into one strategy. Her presence binds them together, her refusal to waver becoming the fulcrum upon which hope balances. For Eragon, the convergence is personal as well as political. His bond with Saphira has deepened into something unshakable, and together they sense the weight of countless eyes upon them. To the soldiers, they are not simply a rider and his dragon, they are symbols of a future worth dying for. Eragon feels the gravity of that faith press upon his shoulders. The choices he makes here will ripple across the war, binding his fate to every soul on the field. Roran's path, too, converges with Eragon's, though neither cousin fully grasps the magnitude of their entwined destinies. Roran fights not with spells or wings, but with the sheer force of will, his hammer rising and falling as though each strike were the voice of his people refusing to yield. His presence among the Varden is no coincidence. It is proof that rebellion is no longer scattered villages or small acts of defiance. It is a tide rising from every corner of Alagaësia, flowing toward a single cause. What makes the chapter powerful is the sense that all divisions between rider and farmer, elf and dwarf, human and Urgle, are dissolving in the fire of necessity. Their differences remain, but they no longer matter. What matters is the convergence of purpose, to resist Galbatorix, to stand against the crushing weight of tyranny, to seize the fragile chance for freedom. By the end of convergence, the storm has quieted only to gather again, but now its shape is clear. The scattered streams of resistance have joined into a river, surging toward the empire with unstoppable momentum. The convergence is not an ending, but a beginning. The moment when all paths align and the true weight of destiny settles upon Eragon, Saphira, Roran, and the Varden alike. Chapter 69. Eldest. Eldest is the chapter where the title of the book resonates most clearly, pulling together the themes of legacy, kinship, and the burdens carried by those born first into responsibility. The word itself suggests not only seniority, but also weight. The one who bears the heaviest load, who must lead when others falter, who must endure when others lean upon them. In this moment, the threads of Eragon's destiny tighten, revealing truths that shake the foundations of his identity. The revelations come like hammer blows. Secrets about lineage and loyalty, long hidden, are forced into the open. Eragon, who has struggled to reconcile the farm boy of Carvajal with the rider of prophecy, finds his very blood called into question. What he thought he knew of his family, of Murtagh, of the tangled lines of inheritance, is shattered. The word eldest takes on a sharper meaning. It is about birth order, yes, but also about inheritance of sorrow, power, and the mistakes of those who came before. Murtagh's presence in this chapter is like a scar torn open. Once a brother in arms, he now stands revealed as both kin and enemy, a mirror of what Eragon might become under different circumstances. Bound by oaths he cannot break, Murtagh embodies the tragedy of being eldest in the worst sense. Burdened by expectations and curses he did not choose. His defiance is twisted into servitude, his strength shackled to Galbatorix's will, and in his confession, Eragon sees the cruel hand of fate reshaping lives as if they were pieces on a board. For Eragon, the revelation is devastating but clarifying. Blood ties, once a source of comfort, are now chains of doubt. He realizes that being rider is not about lineage, but about choice, that what defines him is not who his parents were, but the decisions he makes now. Saphira anchors him in this storm, her voice fierce and unwavering. To her, kinship is not measured in blood, but in bond, and she reminds him that they are family in the truest sense, chosen, tested, and unbreakable. The chapter is heavy with sorrow, but it also forges strength. The word eldest becomes not only a title, but a challenge. To be eldest is to bear what others cannot, to lead where others falter, to carve a path even when destiny itself conspires against you. Eragon steps into that mantle, scarred but resolute, determined not to let the mistakes of the past dictate the future. By the end of Eldest, the air is thick with loss, betrayal, and the unyielding pull of destiny. Yet within that weight glimmers a new clarity. Eragon cannot change the blood in his veins, but he can choose what kind of rider, what kind of man he will become. The eldest may inherit burdens, but they also inherit the chance to break the cycle. And in that, hope still flickers. Chapter 70. Inheritance. Inheritance is a chapter soaked in legacy. The very word carries with it both promise and burden, for inheritance is never freely chosen. It is thrust upon the living by the dead, carried whether one wishes it or not. Here, Eragon confronts what it truly means to inherit, not in gold or land, but in power, responsibility, and the consequences of a world scarred by those who came before. The chapter opens with the weight of revelations still pressing on him. The truths of blood and kinship revealed in Eldest have not loosened their grip. Instead, they deepen into something harsher. Eragon realizes that inheritance is not about fairness. It is about being given the remnants of choices others made, both noble and terrible, and being forced to shape them into something new. He bears the inheritance of his rider's order, once glorious, now ruined, of his kinship with Murtagh, once a brotherhood, now fractured, and of his own people's rebellion, hopeful but desperate, clinging to him as their symbol. The elves mark this inheritance with solemnity. They see him not merely as a student now, but as a bearer of their ancient legacy. The training, the rituals, the gifts, they were never simply lessons. They were preparations, passing the torch of ages into his hands. Oromis speaks plainly of this truth. To inherit is not to receive, but to carry forward, to turn what was broken into what must yet endure. For the elves, Eragon is not only a rider, he is their inheritance, their last chance to see the balance restored. Saphira, as always, grounds him. To her, inheritance is not a burden, but a continuity. Dragons do not hoard only gold. They hoard memory, wisdom, and pride. She reminds him that what has been passed to them is not only sorrow, but also strength. Her fire is an inheritance of her kind, one that cannot be extinguished. And through their bond, she presses on him the truth that their task is not to lament what they have inherited, but to wield it with purpose. Roran's story, running parallel, reflects this theme as well. His inheritance is not of dragon or rider, but of his village, his family, and the hammer that has become both weapon and symbol. He inherits the grief of Carvajal and transforms it into defiance, proving that inheritance need not be chains. It can also be a forge, shaping something harder, stronger, more enduring than what came before. By the end of Inheritance, Eragon stands more firmly in his role. He cannot shed what he has inherited, nor can he choose the blood that flows in his veins. But he can choose what to make of it. Legacy, he realizes, is never a gift without weight, but it is also never without hope. To inherit is to be entrusted with the chance to remake the world. And in that understanding, his path, though fraught, becomes clearer. Chapter 71. Reunion. Reunion closes the arc of Eldest with a chapter that is at once intimate and immense. After so much loss, betrayal, revelation, and war, the simple act of seeing a familiar face becomes monumental. This chapter is about the weaving back together of lives torn apart, about the fragile hope found when paths once separated converge again. For Eragon, the reunion is not only with people but with purpose. He has faced revelations that shook the ground beneath him, truths about bloodlines, betrayals, and the crushing inheritance of the riders. Yet here, amid the smoldering aftermath of war, he finds that he is not as alone as he once feared. The presence of kin, of friends, of those who still stand with him, becomes a salve against the wounds destiny has inflicted. The embrace of familiarity does not erase the scars, but it steadies him, reminding him why he fights. Roran's path, long divergent, also folds back into Eragon's. Their reunion is fraught with unspoken weight. The blacksmith's son and the farm boy, now hardened leaders in their own right, standing side by side once more. They are no longer the boys of Carvajal. The hammer and the blade have reshaped them into men marked by sacrifice. Yet beneath the changes lies a bond that neither distance nor war could sever. In their eyes, each sees both the stranger their cousin has become and the brother they still know. The Varden, battered but unbroken, gather as well, their reunion one of survival. To clasp hands, to share breath with those thought lost, is to reclaim a piece of humanity stolen by Galbatorix's cruelty. Nasuada, Nargarjvog, the villagers of Carvajal, all threads that once seemed separate now intertwine, creating a tapestry of defiance stronger than before. The reunion is not only personal, it is collective, the joining of disparate lives into one resistance. Saphira embodies the chapter's emotional heart. Through her, Eragon feels the depth of what reunion truly means, the return not only of bodies, but of spirits. Her joy is fierce and unguarded, her wings arching high as if to shield those gathered. She roars not in challenge, but in triumph, declaring that what has been torn apart can, at least in part, be restored. Yet the chapter does not end in simple joy. Beneath the relief lies the sobering knowledge that reunion is fleeting. War still looms, Galbatorix's shadow stretches long, and the victories won here are only beginnings. Still, reunion leaves the story on a note of quiet strength. It affirms that even in the darkest times, the bonds of kinship, love, and loyalty can endure, and in that endurance lies the seed of hope. Conclusion. The journey of Eldest closes not with the certainty of peace, but with the unmistakable weight of transformation. From its opening pages, where the echoes of Ajihad's death splinter the Varden, to its final moments on the burning plains, where blood, fire, and revelation reshape destinies, this book is less about resolution and more about becoming. Every character, Eragon, Roran, Nasuada, even Murtagh, emerges altered, hardened by the crucible of war and the truths revealed along the way. For Eragon, the boy from Carvajal is gone. In his place stands a rider, scarred by battle and blood, sharpened by elven wisdom, yet humbled by the revelation of kinship with his enemy. He carries the weight of inheritance, of the riders, of his family, of the rebellion itself, and though his path is still uncertain, he has accepted that his choices, not his blood, will define him. Saphira, more than a companion, has become his equal. Fierce, radiant, and unshakably bound to him, her flame the mirror of his own growth. Together, they embody not perfection, but the promise of what might still be rebuilt from ruin. Roran's arc, too, rises from tragedy into legend. From a blacksmith's son abandoned by fate, he has become a leader of people, forging unity out of grief and desperation. His hammer, simple yet unyielding, symbolizes the strength of ordinary men and women who refuse to bow before tyranny. His reunion with Eragon is not just familial, it is the convergence of two paths shaped differently by the same injustice, now entwined in the larger struggle against Galbatorix. The Varden themselves emerge as both fragile and formidable. Under Nasuada's steel-like resolve, they find direction, though not without cost. Dwarves, Urgles, elves, humans, all long divided, begin to glimpse the necessity of standing together. Their alliances are uneasy, their victories bloody, but in their convergence lies the seed of something greater than rebellion. The possibility of a free Alagaësia. And then there is Murtagh, the tragic reflection of what Eragon might become if bound by the wrong oaths. His revelations crack the foundation of Eragon's understanding, but they also sharpen his resolve. Murtagh embodies the danger of unchecked power and the cruelty of fate, a reminder that victory will demand more than strength. It will demand sacrifice. In the end, Eldest does not give easy closure. It leaves us in the shadow of loss, in the smoke of battle, with more questions than answers. Yet within that uncertainty burns the steady flame of hope. The rebellion stands, bloodied but unbroken. Bonds of family, of choice, of defiance have been tested and proven. Eragon, though scarred, has taken his place not only as a rider, but as a symbol. And the story, far from finished, stretches forward with the promise of trials yet greater, but also of victories that might one day match the scale of their sacrifices. Eldest is not the tale of a war won. It is the tale of a generation awakening, of a rider and a dragon stepping into their destiny, of ordinary people like Roran rising to extraordinary heights, and of a rebellion finding its shape. It ends not with triumph, but with endurance, and in endurance, the faint but unyielding light of freedom. This has been the summary of Eldest, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Bill.